Hi, folks. Welcome to the Omnist Hour. I am apologizing for yesterday's broadcast. Tried to go live on YouTube and it seemed to be working just fine, but in fact was recording gibberish, unintelligible gibberish for some reason beyond my comprehension. And I'm not going to deal with it anymore, so I'm redoing yesterday's message as a pre-recorded segment, which unfortunately won't benefit from automatic subtitling, thanks YouTube, or many of the other things that are useful from live streaming. I don't know whether the problem was with YouTube or with my provider between, but I can tell you it's very difficult to get messages out that folks don't want to be heard or seen. At any rate, we're going to revisit again the topic of yesterday. Hopefully it will come out as good as yesterday did, or maybe even better. The title of this presentation, which I have in front of me, I loaded it just to make sure I didn't misquote myself, is How the Little Red Hen Became the Big Red, White, Blue, and Black Chickens. Subtitled perhaps Timeless Cultural Marxism and Its Relation to Spirituality in the World Today. Okay, so let's drop back and ask ourselves what exactly Rob is talking about here. Most of you raised in Western countries with strong European heritage will recognize the name of a children's story called The Little Red Hen. Many of you may not realize that this story was one of many fables which were written or developed by a Greek philosopher, Aesop. I'm not sure what his full name is. You can go research. But this was basically a Socratic type philosopher who made it his mission to encode what he felt were very useful messages into children's stories, which could be told by teachers anywhere to help their children learn and discuss very important topics in the area of morality, how to live a good life, how to, I don't know, maybe avoid bad karma and build good karma. Many of those stories are a lot deeper than they seem at first glance, and merit a lot more discussion than they give. Okay, so most of you, I'm going to tell you this story as I knew the original story. You can go back and verify if you can find an original translation of the oldest manuscript that had this story of the Little Red Hen. Okay, so the story goes that this little red hen was which one might consider a middle-class barnyard animal. Had a nice little cozy house with an oven to bake bread in, a bunch of little chicks to feed. Oddly enough, no husband around to help out with the chicks, so maybe that's an area of misuse of this story that hasn't been exploited yet by feminists. And you might want to take a look at it and see if you could spin this in a way that will make the men seem like the bad guys, like you do with everything else you do these days. At any rate, this little happy hen and her family of chicks has some grain seed. And the hen comes up with a pretty good idea of using that seed to plant in their garden some more wheat so it can grow up and be harvested and be made into bread, which apparently is the chick's favorite food, even though real birds pretty much eat seed without cooking, without any preparation, wherever they find it upon the ground. Okay, so already we're kind of seeing some evidences of cultural Marxism, even in the original telling by Aesop, who was a product of one of the early, fairly highly citified, civilized areas of the world. The Greek city-states were an early imagining of good governance, where the city would be the center of administration of an area agricultural around it, and basically define the laws by which people retained their property, then dealt with disputes between property, which is a large part, if you're aware of the writings of any ancient civilization, not just the Greeks, the Romans, Sumerians, the Egyptians, a large fraction of their writings were actually about law, property law, rights, civil rights, even the rights due to gods. They believed were very, very real. Okay, so this chicken in the original story set out to do all the things that were necessary to turn grain seed into bread. She sowed the seed, she watered them, waited for the sun to nurture them, weeded, presumably, thinned where necessary, eventually harvested the grain and ground it, mixed it with a few other ingredients, put it in a, obviously this is not a very accurate representation because you don't break bread like that without some sort of mold to put it in. It'd be splattering all over the oven if you did, but well, this was the only free image I could find. At least I think it's a free image, and I didn't want to violate anyone's copyright on this beautiful old story, which nobody really should have a copyright on. Even if they're drawing new pictures of it, not crediting Aesop, I think they have committed a copyright violation, do you not? If they call their book The Little Red Hen and don't give credit to the author, make no mention of how they have bastardized their work, I would consider that a pretty great sin to be committed by any artist. Anyone who wants to make money off their art, who is not willing to acknowledge plagiarism and misuse of somebody else's story, is pretty sinful in my book and has earned some pretty negative karma. At any rate, this whole story is punctuated by the fact that all along this process, some of the little red hen's neighbors, cat, dog, pig, duck, it varies, a cow, are all asked at various stages in the process, look, I'm doing this, I'm working on this project, would you like to help out? And you can imagine how any of them might be helpful in any of the process, even if it's only to drive away animals like rats that might scramble around and get the seeds before they even got to grow. Others that might trample the plants before they sprouted new seed, etc., etc. All along this story, all of these other neighbors refused to participate in the work. And so when it came time to have the bread out of the oven, the little red hen says, well, now the bread is done. Who will help me eat it? And of course, everybody says, I will, I will, I will, I will, I will, I will. And she says, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't help with this, you didn't help with that, so you don't get to have bread. Okay? And this is the pure form of this story. And it's basically a rebuke to those that think communal life is perfect. Everybody should own everything, everybody should share everything. This is the most ancient rebuke of communism that I'm aware of, pointing out the very true fact that if everybody gets to share everything and nobody's forced to do the work unless the party wills it, you end up abusing the people who do some of the hardest work, which is producing the food. And if you know anything about what's going on in communist countries like China, what went on in the USSR, what happens in Cuba, what happens in Venezuela, all these countries that are being held out as models of communist success, how to do socialism right. What you will discover is that absent any laws protecting the people who are actually growing things and doing the work of providing agricultural products, these people are the lowest of the low. And this is why so much of the world is suffering shortages of wheat, of rice, of oil, all of the basic staples that could keep humanity alive are in short supply. And it's because of exactly both communist and globalist manipulation of people and their disdain for the people that do the actual work of providing food for you. Oh, they should work for free because they're just lowly truck drivers. They're just lowly farmers. This is communist thinking. It is authoritarian. And what's particularly disturbing is if you're a parent of a child that's been getting taught in the last 20 years, you're seeing a very different version of this story. How many of you think this story is all about, oh, they didn't help, but we're going to give them food anyway because we're so nice and we share. It would be so unkind not to share this bread because we have so much bread. And oh, they were stupid, but they still need to have some of the bread. Have you read these versions? These lies that are marketed as the little red hen story that tell the exactly opposite lesson from that story? Now, some of them add other nuances that, give you a little pity for these other characters. Some of them show the cat playing a fiddle and giving everybody music. It makes them happy while they're working. Others demonstrate other things that these other creatures might deserve to get a helping for. Dog barking away strangers, barking away foxes that might come and kill the hen or kill the chicks, harm the community. There's a lot of ways you can justify sharing grain in a community, as long as everybody has a role to play and that role is appreciated. Now, what makes a community work? Any of you who have grown up in postmodernist society have seen all around you people that just want the benefits of being in that society without doing any of the work. And I'm not just talking about poor people, I'm talking about the rich ones too. You've got rich people who want to make laws that guarantee that they will make money no matter what. This is why they legislate, why they demand that there should be inflation every year. Oh, 2 or 3% inflation is good for the economy. Bullshit. It's good for the rich people. It gives them free money at the expense of the taxpayer, who is ultimately on the hook for the national debt, who is ultimately on the hook for inflation because their money is in the bank, and the bank pays interest rates that are a pittance compared to what inflation is. They're actively stealing money through an anti-little redhead scheme. Same goes for the folks that want to have student loan forgiveness, that want, 40 acres and a mule for every homeless person. This is anti-little red hand, populist, propagandist politics. And at heart, it's not that they're trying to do any good for anybody. They're trying to get votes. They're trying to get support so they can get their people in power and dole out more money, more of the taxpayers' money to their friends. And if you don't believe me, you'll just need to go research any related area. The big weapons industry, the farm-ed agricultural complex, the entertainment industry, financial industry, the education industry are all being run to serve the fat cats that make the laws, fat cats that tell you what bread you can have, what seeds you can have, how you're going to raise them, what you can do with them when they're done, and come and take, their slice of the bread when you're done, saying, oh, well, of course, we deserve it because we're your government. And there are better and worse governments. I'm not saying you don't need to pay taxes, but you deserve to be able to ask, what am I getting in return for letting your government protect me from all the bad things that might hurt us? That's what they've been doing. They claim they've been protecting you from the pandemic, despite the fact that every honest, open, well-constructed scientific experiment or analysis of the data, now that we've been through 2 years of the pandemic, indicates that A, lockdowns were a stupid idea. Absolutely stupid. Shutting down the entire economy to protect everyone. It was absolutely a stupid idea to congregate the most vulnerable people to this disease, the elderly, where did they congregate them? In New York. In elderly homes. They've crowded elderly homes with the people at risk, making it more likely that they would catch the disease and go under ventilators. And that's why New York State, New York City had some of the highest COVID death rates early in the pandemic. Governor Cuomo, your biggest sin is not the big dick messing with women in your entourage. That was a false flag that they brought up to get rid of you because nobody wanted anybody to hear about what was really going on in your fucking state during the early pandemic. Let's see what else they did. Personal protective equipment. Now, I know a lot about this personally because I was living in Colorado at the time it all started, and I have a Chinese daughter, well, half Chinese. I have a Chinese ex-family, and I caught COVID before anybody knew it was COVID. I had it back in 2020 before anybody had talked about this disease outside of China. But you know what? When I went out to get treatment for what was the worst flu I ever had me down for about 5 weeks, uh, from about early January 2020 to early February. And it was really bad for my daughter too. And guess what? You know where it came from? My ex's sister came from China for a visit. Not because she knew she was spreading anything, but because the Chinese Communist government knew what they were doing and they lied about it. They were restricting flights and access within China and still allowing open international flights, and even telling governments that they were being racist for even hinting at shutting down flights in the midst of this unknown new pandemic, new disease that looked like it might go pandemic. This is truth. And when this whole PPP problem first came up, you know what also is truth? More than a month before most Americans heard of COVID at all, Chinese Americans with ties to the mainland were already hoarding. I was looking at the shelves. I saw it firsthand. You couldn't find a mask to save your life. 3 or 4 weeks before most people had ever heard of COVID. And then, oh, well, you don't need masks because we need them for the first line protectors that are doing that. And oh, well, yeah, yes, there is some science that says mask wearing of too long duration is actually harmful to your respiratory health, can actually cause problems by breathing in your own exhaled moist air and trapping new germs there. And in fact, physicians who do operations change their masks and gloves regularly if they're doing a long operation. They actually take breaks and allow an assistant surgeon to work for a while so they can breathe normally, because they know full well how damaging it can be to wear a mask for a long period of time. It restricts the flow of oxygen. It forces you to rebreathe exhaled gas, which is no longer oxygen. It's what happens after the oxygen is used to pick up all the junk that your body doesn't need, that your lungs are transferring to the oxygen. That's why we breathe. We breathe in oxygen because your body needs the nutrients, the oxygen, the nitrogen, etc., that are in air. And when it breathes out, there's a much higher concentration of carbon dioxide, which is not a bad thing per se, but it's not going to be, if you lived in a carbon dioxide atmosphere, you would die. Okay? And we have had no discussion among approved media sources on the problem of overuse of masks, especially the cloth masks. At least are fairly breathable. They also don't stop particles as small as the virus, but well, let's not tell anybody about that. The N95 masks that they've been recommending shut off so much of the air that really the only air you're getting is pretty much from around the mask, not through it. If you want to get a mask that really does anything, you have to get a fancy one with very expensive filter that, cost about $50 a pop. Who can afford to buy? If you work, you might need a change mask 2-3 times for one shift to actually have the benefit of wearing a mask. How many people can afford $200 a day or have their employer fork over $200 a day to get any real protection for their workers? It's all a big bunch of bullshit. And half the world is still wearing masks, thinking, well, I'll be safe. The government tells me I still need to be wearing masks. The CDC says it's still a good idea. The lunatics are running the asylum. The lunatics who would take a story like The Little Red Hen and make of it a very, very simplistic solution that sells their brand of dog food. And you see that all around you, and it's not a new thing. It's been accelerated into steroids with the advent of TV, with the advent of social media, with the advent of the internet. Advertising has gone absolutely nuts. It's more important than the product. The marketing becomes more important than the product. Creating a market where none exists is a far better strategy for most corporations than actually solving something you need. This is exactly how the big pharma industry works now. They used to come up with drugs to solve problems. Some of the old vaccines actually worked. They did nearly eradicate smallpox with a vaccine that was well tested, well designed, that wasn't just a get-rich-quick scheme to, we need to profiteer from this new disease that just miraculously appeared from China, miraculously near one of their top government biolabs, which miraculously was doing taxpayer-funded gain-of-function research under the auspices of the NIH, whose mouthpiece, Dr. Fauci, is Mr. Science himself. I am science. This is just how evil you can get when you start telling little white lies about complex problems. You start making up fairy tales to justify your fairy tale existence. And the existence of the average corporate or government fat cat is a fairy tale world. For most of the world's governments, and especially the UN, this new global government, once you get in, as long as you play the game, you play like a good team member for the global elite, there's no getting out. Look at the bastard Tedros, who absolutely was a huge part of supporting the lies coming out of communist China about the start and spread of the pandemic. Now he's criticizing China for their zero COVID lockdown, and he's such a good guy now. Fucking bullshit. The truth is that these bastards that run the world, that pretend to be these meritocratic corporate gods of science, will throw each other under the bus on a heartbeat if the heat starts getting close to them. Idiots like Tedros, like Fauci. My wife just said she forgot the Kindle I was going to send with her. She's going back to Jakarta for a few days to take care of some business. Anyway, I'll deal with that later. these folks, they actually may believe their own lies. They have been so far removed from the reality of what they are the head of, what they're the master of, that they're like this stupid little red hen. All she's got on her mind is feeding bread to her chicks and doesn't see anybody outside, any of the rest of the world who might be starving, doesn't realize that, you know what, one loaf, gosh, how many chicks do I have? How long does it take to eat a loaf of bread if you're a chicken? How likely it is that the loaf is going to spoil and need to be thrown out? Maybe I could share a little bit. Of course not all. And we shouldn't mandate that everybody has to give their bread for the betterment of the state. Every side of the political spectrum I see in this planet today is, in some sense, serving what I've described as the dark anti-God org. Mind controlling, mind messing, hallucination, holographic hallucination creating monster that hates humanity because humanity is God's current chosen species. Not because they're such a wonderful bunch. Anybody who looks at humanity can say, God, my God, why would anybody create that? And what I've been telling you on my channel is the whole reason it was created is to harbor souls of all different ages and backgrounds. Good souls, bad souls, stupid souls, smart souls, ones who've had one lifetime, ones who've had thousands upon thousands of lifetimes. Why? Because we're in an experiment to perfect a new law. Now, what kind of law would require souls of all different backgrounds to incarnate in human form? Experiencing reincarnation amnesia, having to grow up from a little baby to find out who they are again, who they are this time, even if they have had thousands of previous lives to know and understand who they were. The law being developed here, the law that the whole universe was developed for, the whole multiverse, which I'm telling you, our universe is only one of a universe pair that was created as one of the first pieces of this experiment. Yes, Virginia, there is an anti-universe of antimatter, complementary to our universe of positive matter. We're in an experiment, and the experiment, we've had to have a wide range of test subjects. As anyone who's done any kind of a social experiment knows, sampling can affect the experiment. Knowledge of the experiment can affect the experiment. Why don't we know everything about our past? Why don't we seem to have godlike spiritual powers like is recorded in our past history? Because the folks that have been working on this experiment finally realized what social scientists are understanding now: how to run a social experiment. And souls are social things. A soul is a consciousness. It has free thought, free will, freedom of choice when it's in an incarnation vehicle to say, well, I'm going to eat right now. I want to have a drink of this lovely tea right now. No, I changed my mind. I'm going to save it for later. What I really want is a nice little chocolate. No, I changed my mind, or I changed my tummy, I changed my heart. People talk like that because what is happening? Your mind, your stomach, your naughty bits, your heart are pieces of a soul vehicle that have their own oversoul. This is why so many of us have a feeling of multiple personality manifestation. Those who have more of it, folks call crazy and they put them in the insane asylum. Those people may just be more aware of what's really going on in their body than you are. So, what are we to conclude about this? Let's get back to the title. How does this relate to big red, white, blue, and black chickens? Well, I'll tell you what. There are a lot of folks right now that are scared. They're scared because they've been told to be scared of a virus, of a cure, of another country, of another country's leader, of this, of that, of aliens, ETs. They're even scared of God. Or they're telling other people they should be scared of God. Ultimately, anyone who lets their decision process be ruled by fear, either spreading fear or consuming fear, is becoming part of a network of chickens. Now, what do chickens do when they feel threatened? Have you ever seen a chicken fight? Cockfight? They're real popular. This part of the world, the Philippines. I don't think so much in Indonesia, but in the Philippines, cockfighting is a huge sport, big gambling sport. Because chickens, when they feel threatened, become extremely vicious. Hey, Ma, gift of cake. So, what I'm telling you here is partisan fear mongering, even partisan anti fear mongering. You've got a large group of people, as I talked about in the previous podcast, who sort of live in this anti fear universe. Oh, fear is your great enemy. You can't be afraid of anything because, it's not really real what's going on here. And when you get back to source, it will all make sense. God, that is elitist anti-fear, and it's just as bad. And to the extent that you're modifying your inputs and putting them out as a new version of the little red hen, you are becoming one of the big colored chickens. The red chickens of China, the red chickens of the Republican Party, the blue chickens of the Democrats, or the half of the Ukraine flag. At least they're honest about the other half. The yellow flag is probably pretty honest for most of the people in that country, just being afraid of everybody because they've been so abused and manipulated throughout history. Nobody knows what to believe. A circumstance they share with our Polish friends, who have been used as pawns between conflicts between Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman and Tsarist empires for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And this is just a continuation of those battles, with a new set of elites profiteering from it. Arms profiteers, nonprofit donation profiteers, Oh, let's go save all the dogs in Ukraine because, oh, dogs are dying every day there. God, are people stupid to be donating to these organizations? These are no different than the Clinton Foundation, than the Gates Foundation. They don't need your money, but they'll be glad to take it to use for their personal agendas, which are mostly political. Now, here's another little redhead story that I participated in personally and know quite a bit about. Those of you who are young and haven't been voting very long may not realize that all of the cheating and manipulation, malfeasance that happened in the 2020 election was already very well perfected and used almost as nefariously during the 2016 primaries, where an incredibly popular candidate, Bernie Sanders, was absolutely without a doubt, without a question, cheated by the DNC, by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And so were all his supporters who donated $5, $10, whatever they could, because they thought he was going to be the great savior of progressivism. Your money was misused. It didn't go towards Bernie's campaign. It went to Hillary Clinton. A Hillary Clinton who was using her money to buy fake evidence against Trump. This is true. It's all coming out now. Look at the Durham probe. I'm not a Trumpy, but I am a truther. And they cheated. Biden's campaign cheated. There are any number of sources you can look to find this out. You don't have to watch the 2000 Mules. All you had to do was have your fucking eyes open during the 2020 election to anything but the big five media companies that were controlling all the eyeballs and all the social media and shutting down anybody with any sort of an alternative narrative, which you would know too if you actually bothered to listen to the Hunter Biden story when it first came out, even in mainstream news, and they were canceled. And it's all true. The Biden family are a career bunch of crooks. 47 years of being on the take. Oh, maybe he started out, with a good intent to represent the little guy in the union. That's the persona that he tries to project when he's somewhat coherent. Bullshit. You don't spend 47 years in Washington, D.C. doing anything but benefiting yourself, being part of the squad, the team. Oh, he's a good team player. He'll vote for anything if you lobby him. Don't be so stupid, people. You are engaging with your world politically, spiritually, economically at grade school. You're still sucking up life like nursery stories like the Little Red Hen, Cinderella, the 12 Dancing Princesses, Rumpelstiltskin. You're not serving yourself doing it. And you're not going to be forgiven. Because as I've told you, the experiment needed a wide range of souls with a wide range of experience and capability. This is how you do good science. When you have a great idea, you test the hell out of it before you release the product. The product we're testing here is karma, the latest version of karma. This is the truth behind all scripture, all ancient writings, every bit of real history that you can dig up on this planet, or we're beginning to discover from other planets, which have had their chosen species. This planetary system has been chosen for a long, long time. Humanity is only the latest of a long line of species created to try to perfect this idea of karma. And this is why so many of the remaining texts, like the Bible, like the Vedas, like the Sumerian text, like much of what's in the Egyptian tradition, like the Maya tradition, they're all fairly nihilistic. And they talk about the end of times as, oh, well, it's going to be a really horrible, horrible thing. But a few people are going to ascend. Well, there's partial truth in that. But a lot of what's baked into those old stories is some very dark conclusions that folks had from previous attempts to make this experiment converge, to make karma start rolling its wheels, turning out better souls without a lot of bad consequences. This is why we had to forget. This is why we don't have, everybody doesn't have all these mass spiritual powers. Yes, some people have latent ones. Some people are able to do remote viewing. Some people are able to move things around with their hands and all sorts of little parlor tricks. But we don't have gods amongst us anymore, do we? At least not like the gods we used to. Because if you look back at the stories of the old gods, they were some pretty warped motherfuckers. They sinned all the time. They killed all the time. On a whim, they would turn somebody into a newt, a frog, a stag, a sea, a river. Do you really want those kind of gods back? And that's what some of you are saying. Oh, we just need to go back to a golden era, a golden age where all the chicks were ruled over by mother hen nature. And of course, the female is so much better at managing everything. It's just because of these horrible men that are ruling our, caused this patriarchy, especially those horrible, awful European white men who did everything wrong. I'm tired of hearing this bullshit. It's cultural Marxist nonsense. Do you know who the first explorers, the first conquistadors were in the age of exploration? No one from Europe. 1400, the biggest navy in the world was the Chinese Navy, led by their great admiral conquistador, Zheng He. Go read about it. Read about how they treated the people they encountered in Japan, in the Philippines, in what is now Indonesia, Korea. Yes, sometimes they satisfied themselves with trading outposts, with demographic imperialism, sending over their workers, their tradesmen, their merchants to take over the market and become the new elite in what had been fairly egalitarian societies before. This is still going on today, by the way. And it is very, very much Han supremacist. Most Han people are taught, not only in communist China, but even in Taiwan, in Singapore, other places which have Han large or almost majorities, who tend to be the ones that have most of the business and property money are taught they have it because they are Chinese. We raise our kids better. We work harder. We blah, 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 blah. And this is exactly the kind of elitist, racist idealism that you heard from Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Han supremacy is as much of a lie, as much of a political and genocidal lie as that of Aryan supremacy. We don't have to buy that. And this is what they're spreading with a lot of the cultural Marxist goings on. And now they're complaining, oh, now you're being racist because now you're attacking Chinese. Well, that's exactly what you taught us to do, to attack each other based on race, to bring up old racial issues which ceased to have any pertinence 40 years ago in the United States and most of the rest of the world, and suddenly make it a topic again. They are the ones funneling money to organizations like BLM, like Antifa. They and globalist billionaires who have huge bets on the US dollar collapsing, like George Soros, who is somebody you absolutely should be hating. If you looked at his history, what he's done with his career, he's made a career out of destroying people's currency, destroying the livelihood of whole countries by currency manipulation. This is an evil dude. He's not your friend, even if he's donating to your favorite causes. The foundations established by guys like him are absolutely evil, no matter what they say they're working on. They don't give a flying fuck about humanity. Now, I hope that you don't show this to your kids thinking it's going to be about some fairy tale. If I misled you about the content with the title, I'm sorry. But this is stuff that people need to hear. It may not be pleasant to hear, but a large fraction of humanity has the IQ of a newborn chick. It's not necessarily your fault. You've been bred to it. You've been fed it from cradle to grave by media programming and school indoctrination. They do not teach a liberal education. You don't even know what a liberal education is because it hasn't existed for 200 years. The last time anybody got a liberal education was in some of the more enlightened countries in Europe, whose leaders said, you know what? If we are going to not have these horrible problems that we saw happen with the French Revolution and the guillotines and off with their heads, and anybody who wasn't in good with whoever the Revolutionary Council was that day could find everything that they had taken away and their head on a block under a guillotine. This was the truth of the French Revolution. And what the U.S. Revolution very well could have been if there hadn't been some more enlightened cats trying to keep people from doing stupid things. And yes, they made some compromises, like not ending slavery when most of the founders of the Constitution were in favor of it. You know why they didn't? Well, I'll give you an example you may not be aware of. Our great first president, founding father, George Washington, leader of the Continental Army, was the richest landholder in the United States, in the colonies. the time of the Revolutionary War. He was also a very ambitious man who had ideas of becoming a general. So they let him become a general as long as he would support the plan. And it was guys like him who were the reason why the Constitution reads like we shouldn't have slavery, but we still have slavery. Because a large fraction of their revenue derived from slave plantations, and they didn't want to lose it until they figured out a way to replace the slaves with an even more easy to manipulate workforce, which is the story behind most of the immigration waves of the US. Were driven by people facing hardship in other countries, either real or manufactured by political causes, and being encouraged to move to the colonies, to move to Australia, Canada, and even the United States, even though it was not technically a colony anymore, was still, to all intents and purposes, to the upper crust, part of the British Empire, part of the elitist European empire. They've been planning these immigration games, playing them for longer than you could imagine. Creating shortages, creating gaps in population that then encourage migrants to come in and create more identity politics that they can use to keep people from uniting against the folks that really are their enemies. This class of people that has no loyalty to anybody but their own class. Uh-oh, Rob's starting to sound a little bit Marxist there. Now, you remember the Marx story about the oppressors are the bourgeoisie and the oppressed are the proletariat. Bourgeoisie, do you know what that means? That means somebody who's done well enough for themselves that they have their own business. They're making their own money. They're actually supporting themselves. Maybe they have a factory and they employ some other people. That doesn't make them evil. Those aren't the bad guys. Those aren't the real bad guys. They're not even the billionaire class, who aren't all bad guys, but are being heavily influenced by the ones who are. The real bad guys are the ones that have so many assets, so many fake bank accounts, so many tricky little ways of squirreling away money in all currencies, gold, and everything you could possibly imagine, that nobody can track down how much wealth they have, how well they've hidden it through their large web of families. These are the folks that really run the world, always have. And they think they always will. And they're fucking scared of what's going on right now because of the very things I'm telling you. We have been part of an experiment, and those folks were allowed to operate in this experiment because they were very important test cases to have if you were trying to make a workable law of karma. Now, Rob, what happens when this experiment is over? I've been telling you it's concluded. The concluding event of this experiment is for the real God, not the authoritarian, micromanaging, controller of the universe God that they think is God. That's Ford. That's God's nemesis, if you will, anti-God. The real God who came up with this idea of karma as a training program and advancement program for souls to find out who they are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and move up through a meritorious system to higher positions where they will still be challenged. Because there are three kinds of incarnations you can have. You can have a physical incarnation, which is what we're experiencing here in this human life. You can have spiritual incarnations, where you take a similar place in some part of heaven as part of the heavenly staff, which does a lot of consulting work, helping to guide souls that have a similar background, similar resonance to them. Help them plan their next life and learn how being a leader works, for all its pluses and minuses and all its temptations. And then there's a highest level of incarnation, the God level, which is where you get real responsibility for real visible creation, because you have your own universe where you can explore ideas to your heart's content and even propose those ideas for integration into God's universe. And this is what responsible senior creators do and have been doing. God didn't create everything. That's absurd. We all co-create. That doesn't mean God isn't worthy of admiration, adulation, emulation. First creator, a lot of incredible things. Here we are now. And happens to love his fellow souls so much that he is participating in the experiment himself. This is why I tell you the 7-day creation story in the Bible is bullshit, a half-truth bullshit. Perfection was not created in 6 days, and God isn't off on the golf course having a good time watching you guys screw up his perfect creation. This is absurd. It's illogical. It's dumb. What's really happening is the 7th day of creation was when God stopped active participation in this creation, adjusting, tweaking, and said, okay, I think this thing karma is good enough. I know people don't like it. They feel like it's too restrictive. They're getting frustrated with coming back and making the same mistakes over again and following this stupid cat Buddha who's telling you, well, the problem is that the wheel of reincarnation is something you have to escape. And until you escape it by divorcing your ego, killing your ego, then you can't be in nirvana. Okay, I'm making fun of every religion because you're all swallowing half lies and bullshit. That may feel good, but it's just not true. The truth is that God has been incarnating amongst you and using the same rules. God starts nothing, and sometimes God dies before he gets out of pajamas, before he gets out of diapers. Sometimes God dies as a rebellious teenager, believing in communism, believing in revolution, wanting to be a militant messiah, like the Jews would like to have come and defeat all their enemies and drive everybody away from the Temple Mount so they can rebuild the temple. Sometimes comes as kind of a softy messiah, like Jesus. Oh, turn the other cheek. Render unto Caesar what are Caesar's due. Bend over and spread them, because you're going to have a kingdom in heaven. Everything will be forgiven. Just believe in me and everything is forgiven. I take all your sins on me. Fucking bullshit. I don't mind telling Christians that. I got problems with every Orthodox religion, every fundamentalist religion. And I am more than happy to talk about it, because I can also tell you how you can use your religion in a more healthy way by making it an omnist version of your religion. What is omnism, you ask? Well, I've talked about this in my original segment. Omnism is basically approaching conflicting information not with critical thinking, but with open thinking. Okay, why would people believe something like this? What caused them to believe it? What evidence there is for or against? What fundamental assumptions have they made that might be wrong? How might this set of beliefs be modified to be more useful than it is? Now, it's not a bad thing for children to have imaginary friends that they can pray to and hope will help them out of whatever their problem is, will keep them safe during the night from all the imagined monsters. Nothing wrong with that, within reason. If you keep thinking like that as an adult, this is dangerous because there's no such almighty authoritarian micromanager love God that's going to come down from heaven and make everything perfect for you. Not how it works. That's unscientific. It's illogical. Any God worth their salt is going to work as a leader, not a dictator. You only have to look around at your world and see what you get when you get dictators. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. True below and above. You don't want an authoritarian micromanaging God. That is Borg. You can go live in Borg's universe if you want to. If you want somebody to tell you when to live, how long you can live, what you have to do while you're living, how many children you can have, what kind of children you can have, what sex you get to call them. If you want somebody to dictate everything, you're going to have that at the end of this experiment because you're not going to be coming back to God's universe, or at least not to God's earth as a human. You have not proven yourself worthy. And that's everything what's going on here. You have only at most maybe 1, 2 more incarnations before you're never going to see this planet again, at least not this version of it. And let me tell you, Borg's Earth is a pretty dark dystopian place. The Earths of many other universes are pretty unpleasant places to actually live. The Mother Goose universe of Nanny State, of the great goddess who looks after all her flock and makes sure nobody does anything bad to anybody else. This fairy tale universe does exist, and there is a goddess who thinks that way is the only way to perfection. Despite having so many examples from her past and past of others who have tried to advise her that show that, you know what you're doing? You're creating a stagnant, boring universe that nobody's going to want to be in. That has more rules than anybody can remember. And you're constantly, oh, I can't say that. Oh, I said something. But I think it's going to be offensive to that person. I better delete it right away. Do you want to live someplace like that? Where you're constantly watching your shadow, wondering if you're going to commit a karmic sin against some nanny goddess who wants you to be nice. You got to have universal love, unconditional love for everybody, and anything that's not unconditional, you're doing bad. My God, you people are letting yourselves get warped, absolutely warped by cultural Marxism. And behind all of that, behind the divisiveness, all of this, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil dogma that some of you are swallowing is a path to the dark God Borg, anti-God Borg who wants your souls, who already knows they've lost the battle on planet Earth they've lost the battle for finalizing karma and is doing everything. The next phase of the battle is as difficult as possible. The more souls this entity can pull into their fold during this lifetime, the more will go to the dark heavens of Borg and get to reincarnate in Borg's Earth universe, or in the parts of God's universe that still have a large Borg influence. And watch Star Trek. I call this anti-God Borg for a reason, because it works like that. It's a spiritual force. It has the ability to worm its way into your thoughts, to get you playing on its side without making contracts like at least a self-respecting devil would. Satan is not your real enemy. Satan is actually one of God's children, whose universe is kind of built up around, well, you know, I've done so many crappy things in all my lifetimes, Daddy, that I think I'm best suited to teaching hard lessons to errant souls. So yeah, Satan comes and makes deals. Other entities like that will, you know, I know you've been praying for success in your business and you'd really like to make $1 million, have that beautiful girl you've been lusting after. Well, I'll tell you what, you just sign on this dotted line and you give me your soul at the end of this life, I'll give you all those things. And the real Satan actually comes through. And there's a lot of people you see around you that are having lives of satanic bliss. They're still going to lose their souls, and they're going to get to see what the real version, not the demo version, of Satan's heaven is like. This is definitely going to be an English experience for these souls. This is the way the afterlife works. There's not just one heaven, just like there's not just one God. There is one original God, one original creator who started the process of responsible creation through spiritual science and creative evolution. And there's a lot of dark heavens, or less bright heavens, you can be taught to be better in. Or you can choose to do worse. Maybe you go from Satan's universe and you enjoy it so much, you move on to Borg's universe. Why do these things exist? Because those thoughts exist. Those souls exist, and souls are immortal. The only way to defeat evil souls is to distance them. And this is another piece of the message I'm trying to share with you so hard. What we're working on is a system that distances unpleasant dark souls from the souls that are trying to do good, to figure out what good is, that are trying to play the game in a responsible and loving manner. It's not easy. It's not intended to be easy. That's why we reincarnate, so we can see the same problems from multiple angles. Because ethical, spiritual questions are not easy. The only way you can think they're easy is if you disconnect like some stupid Buddhist monk. Go sit up on the top of a hill. Isolate yourself from the world, except for the people that come and give you food because they think you're so holy. And, oh, I don't step on insects because I might hurt life. I only eat certain kinds of food because I don't want to kill plants. This is elitist bullshit. Those folks are going to have just as rough a time when they hit heaven as somebody who's actively dealing with problems in their life and taking responsibility for providing their own sustenance taking responsibility for what they do, the harm they do, and whatever job they're doing to provide that service. And to the extent that somebody serves in a righteous, God-fearing, karma-aware way, it doesn't matter what they do. And I'll tell you one more story before I let you go today. It's a story from my childhood, my experience in grade school. Of all the people I encountered in grade school, and I had some wonderful teachers, I had some horrible teachers. I had wonderful classmates, horrible classmates. But the one person who I'll never forget from that time? The janitor. There was only one daytime janitor in the whole school. Maybe he had help from assistants. This is the only guy you ever saw in the hall, sweeping the floors, taking care of everything, cleaning things up, messes, kids made messes. Oh, he'd make a big joke of it, clean it up, and try to make the kids who did it feel better if they deserved it, or give them a kind of a fake tough guy act or something to say, hey, making more work for me. And the guy loved his job. Was such a fixture of this school. Teachers came and went. This janitor was always there. Always in a good mood, always with something nice to say, and knew almost everybody, paid him any attention, and didn't really resent or seem to have any problem with the folks that treated him like just a janitor. This was the first Messiah I remember encountering in my life. And I still remember that. I don't know what his name was. I don't know if he's probably not still alive. Don't know if he died in poverty. Don't know if he had any kind of retirement. Don't know if the school did anything special when he finally was unable to work there anymore. Hired somebody younger and stronger. But that is my personal first Messiah hero. And this is where I'm coming from with all my talk of Messiahs. This is why I am able to say, yes, I am the Messiah. Spreading the information I'm trying to spread. It's taken a long, hard time for me to get here where I can share these messages with you. And for many years, I wasn't able to share as coherent a message as I would like to give you, and I'm giving you now. Why? That's what it takes to be the Messiah. It's not all roses. You are tempted, and you often give in to the dark God horde. And if you read up on my recent commentary on Jesus, you will know that I believe Jesus, if there was a historical Jesus, which I'm not entirely convinced of, was, according to the way it was described in the Bible, a Messiah who started out with a mission and went astray from that mission. Was tempted. Show us another miracle, Jesus. Oh, yeah, sure. Whoa, raised from the dead. Oh, it was so wonderful. If you got to do shit like that to get a following, if you got to play little parlor trick games to get worship, you're no. Most of the real messiahs that have occurred within humanity, you've never heard of. Like that janitor who had a profession school, and on the kids going there, who allowed them to see the world in a different perspective than they'd ever seen before, unless they had exceptionally good parents. Yeah, Maybe he was completely ignored by half the kids. But the ones that noticed him, like me, made a huge difference in their life. This is how real messiahs work. This is how everybody, at some point in some incarnation, is offered the opportunity for a messiah. It's an opportunity, not a guarantee. You aren't born one day and angels say, "Oh, this is the Son of God, going to fulfill all the prophecies of the Bible." That's not the way it works. There is real prophecy. There's dark prophecy. There are real prophets and there are false prophets. And there are prophets that kind of play on both sides, being flung back and forth between temptation and revelation. And there will be after this event and is over. But you got to stop honing in on old plans that had a very fuzzy idea of what was going to be. The Maya picked a pretty good date of 2012 for things to start kind of getting crazy. And there's a lot of other folks predicting other dates as being critical. And I don't know, I've already talked about this before, so maybe I'm not going to go into it again. But some of these dates have significance for God's team, and some of them have significance for Borg's team. Some of the dates are planned around big events that are going to suck a whole bunch of souls into the Borg path. And others are around saving a lot of souls to play on God's team in the future. That's what we're at right now. We're in the end of days, the end of a major phase of creation. Not the end of everything, not the end of time. It's going to go on, but what's going on is going to be changing fundamentally for humanity from being a test subject, a bunch of test crash dummies, to being the latest of many God-level species still in play around the galaxy, around this universe, around Borg's universe. And there are more battles to come. But increasingly, you will see these battles not be physical battles with weapons of mass destruction, but they will be spiritual battles with weapons of mass karma, mass understanding, spiritual responsibility, mass understanding of being, yes, a creator who can create for good, who can create for bad, who can work with other creators or who can oppose other creators. And in order to create responsibly, needs to own their craft and learn a lot more than they currently know about the politics of the little part of the multiverse they play in. Creation is a political activity. Praying is a political activity. When you pray with others, you are trying to combine your spiritual energies to magnify them, because that's what happens when you get multiple souls working for the same future, for the same plan, for the same outcome. It magnifies their energy. And if you can get higher level souls working with you, that's another big magnifier, because old souls, God level souls, have immense amounts of spiritual energy. Result from experience, their spiritual level, and the influence that they have amongst other souls. And yes, God, despite the fact that He is a very independent, individual soul, who values free will, free speech, free everything within responsible bounds, has a ton of allies. Way more spiritual at his command when needed than the Dark One and the Borg anti-God. Despite the fact the Borg anti-God essentially has stolen most of the souls it wields. They have no free will. They have no choice of their own. Borg mind controls them and makes them do whatever Borg wants. And you are seeing that in the absurd actions of many public figures, both in the entertainment industry, in financial industry, in government, houses of Congress, and so forth. There are people that are completely mind controlled by this evil. And it doesn't worry me. It saddens me because I don't like to see people hurt. I don't like to see people used and abused and manipulated. But they are, to some extent, choosing that with how they react to this universe. And to the extent that they're choosing it or ignoring the obvious signs that they are being manipulated, they don't deserve to play in the species anymore. We don't have time to set up the Starship Enterprise with a totally equal crew. Sorry, we need the best of the best to take the battle, to take this new virus, spiritual virus of karma, to the stars. Free planets who have been completely assimilated by Borg. To stop wars between planets whose minds are so mixed up by Borg that they treat enemies as friends and can't resolve conflicts which are as stupid as a two-year-olds fighting over a toy. And this is going on with the wars in the heavens. The real battle between Borg and sanity. And there are wars going on between species that don't even know whose team they're on, don't even know there's a God. Just know that those reptilians are the bad guys. Those Zeta Reticulans are the bad guys. And we're going to fight them to the end of our existence. They're not any smarter than humans. They may have a lot more powerful technology. They may be able to blow up planets. BFD. They still are going to die. They still have souls. And those souls are going to be getting some very different lessons once their heaven gets infected by karma. Latest version of karma. And it's not the same old routine that they were used to. And they went to heaven and planned another life. You're not going to get to go back and, well, I'm going to incarnate as the latest leader of my tribe, the next Dalai Lama, the next Panchen Lama, the next incarnation of Vishnu. It doesn't work that way. It may have worked that way at one time, but laws evolve. Creation evolves. The speed of light may be what it is here today. It might be something different tomorrow. The more useful laws are pretty hard to change, and you've got to have a pretty good rationalization for it. And yeah, if you want to break all the laws, there are universes on the Borg side where, up is down and in is out, and, pigs can fly and whatever. If that's what you want, go live in some fairy tale universe. So you find out who's running it, why, and how they're using you and abusing you and teaching you bullshit. And then you'll probably start heading back towards God's good. That's the way it all works in the end. That's why God's not worried. He doesn't care how many people are worshiping. Doesn't care if you've got a million religions thinking of God in a different way. Makes God pretty sad when you fight with each other over things that none of you really know about God. Your own projections of your designer God, your chosen people. But in the end, I mean, that's the price God has to pay for giving you free will, giving you the opportunity to become a God yourself, to see what it was like for the first creator to get to where we are now. Maybe have a little appreciation for what real responsible creation is. Anyway, I think that was a fairly good replacement for what got garbled going live yesterday, and I'm going to wrap it up now. For the Omnist Hour, I'm Hot Trump. Like, share, subscribe. Argue with me. Anything I said doesn't register true with you, all means I would love to debate. And if you know Rob Trump, as well as some people do, you know I've changed my mind about many things in the course of just one lifetime, and a great many more in the course of the thousands of other lifetimes I'm now aware of. So, without further ado, happy karma, and figure out which path you're on. There are few paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change your road. And I know I'm on the stairway, not nor on one of the fake yellow brick roads that leads to emerald cities and Munchkin kingdoms. Take care. I'll see you next time.